Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome back to your favorite witchy podcast. As the Cauldron bubbles, this is your host, Jasmine, and I've got a lovely guest with me today, damn near a regular, dare I say, maybe even a new co host. We'll have to see. She's been with me through a few episodes, if you will, of As the Cauldron Bubbles. And I'm happy to have you, Nora. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm always happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Happy to have you. Today, we are talking about necromancy. Necromancy, which I
Definitely a
feel
good
like,
subject.
yeah, right? I feel like we've got a lot that we can talk about with this. And as always, I think it's first good to kind of define necromancy. So, in your words, how would you define it, Nora?
Well, the Oxford Dictionary describes it as the supposed practice of communicating with the dead, especially in order to predict the future. My personal description of necromancy includes that, but is a bit more broad. To me, necromancy is working with the dead, which does include ancestor work. Um, for a variety of reasons, not just for divination. It can include um, working with the current of death to achieve different sorceress goals. Um, what those goals may be, I'm sure we'll talk about some of those in the course of the podcast. Um, but to me, necromancy is more than just communicating with the dead. Communication with the dead, veneration of the dead, working with the energy of death. That's kind of my very brief overview of what necromancy is to me. I'm probably forgetting something, but that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, I would say that for me, I mean, that's pretty on point. I think like just to kind of keep things simple and easy, I would say like my definition of it would just be like working with the spirits of the dead, whether they be human or not necessarily. I do think that kind of part of my definition would include necromancy, meaning something that was alive at least one point. So, like in my necromantic art and in my necromantic practice, um, spirits or deities associated with death might be adjacent and included in my necromancy, but typically my necromancy is honestly involving um, the mighty dead or our ancestors or, real tangible in this physical world humans who walked the same dirt path we have, who have passed on, or animals as well. Your girl loves some roadkill. Okay. We love a roadkill moment.
Same.
And just to clarify before things get taken out of context, I don't mean running animals over with my car.
Oh
Just to
God, no.
clarify, I'm not
Yeah.
saying like that. I'm saying like there are times, especially in the springtime here with where we live, where the roadkill, the animals killed on the road, are abundant. And I think honoring them and working with them is definitely a part of my necromancy. And we talked in a previous video when we had Crafton on about spring equinox stuff and kind of like how I view the equinox. And for me, that's definitely a way that I also celebrate that time of year that we're approaching now, the spring equinox, is because there is so much necromantic work to be done because of the amount of roadkill.
Yeah, that's very true. Actually, you and I were just talking about it a few days ago about how I'm planning to refresh my carrion kit is what I've been calling it on my own. So, things that I can use to collect roadkill because, I'd rather get out there and collect the poor little animal myself and, allow it to, be laid to rest someplace where it can decompose, you know, on its own without getting smushed and turned into gelatin on the road, You know, that's unpleasant. Nobody wants to see it. It makes people sad. And yeah, I don't like to see it when cute little fuzzy animals get hit by cars or left on the side of the road. But I especially don't like it when they're just left on the side of the road to rot. So, I mean, at least this way I can honor them. And, you know, if the vibes are right, maybe I can put some use to their bones, you know?
Which for entertainment purposes, allegedly only, I will say. Um, I know that like in our area, we do have a service that comes and, you know, cleans the roads and removes corpses. And depending on where you live in your area, you may or may not, you know, be legally allowed to take animals, especially certain types of animals. Like I'm pretty sure that most birds can be kind of risky.
Yeah, witches, please, if you're out there collecting animals and you're collecting bird parts, please, please, please know what the Migratory Bird Act is. If it is anything other than a bird that you eat, you are legally in the United States not allowed to have any part of it. So
Allegedly for entertainment purposes
allegedly
only.
for entertainment purposes, don't have any bird bits if you can help it.
Yeah, this kind of makes me think too, like, so today I just subscribed to the Bone Box subscription service, which is not sponsoring this podcast at all, for the record. But it's a subscription service that my friend Kat, who was a part of the Whispers estate film that we produced and made together, she has so many gorgeous skulls. And when I was at her house, I was like, how have you gotten all of these skulls? And she told me about this subscription service. And it's like, I think it was like $29.99 a month for me after like, you know, shipping, handling, taxes, all of that. It was basically $30, but you get a skull and an oddity every month. So I think last month's box was a turkey skull. So like that's a domestic bird. So it's not an issue with the Migratory Bird Act. A turkey skull and alligator teeth. But there's also other domestic animals, as well as some wildlife as well. Like I think that she's gotten some deer, some coyote, some cat, some dog, guinea pig, various skulls. And I love subscription services, and I'm no longer subscribed to Witch Casket. Not that there's anything against Witch Casket. That's just one that I like to subscribe to for a few months and then unsubscribe. And I was looking for a new box to subscribe to, and I got the Bone Box, which I'm excited about because I feel like that will only really enhance my necromancy, and also just my connection with animism as well. And, you know, I'm really hoping that in some of these boxes, and I don't know how long I'll stay subscribed. I mean, it's not terribly expensive, but sometimes I get bored of the same subscription box. So I kind of want to have a rotation. But like I have a coyote skull that I use a lot in my practice because it's an animal that's actually local to the land that we live on. And so for me, it's a skull that I've always used to kind of connect with the spirits of this land that I'm living on. Not necessarily, you know, ancestral land, but the land that I am living on now. So yeah, I'm excited about the Bone Box.
Something I do want to touch on real quick because you mentioned a particular animal. We will not be going over the discourse that's been going on TikTok about coyote. That is for other people to discuss. Indigenous people have requested that those who are not of indigenous tribes don't use coyote bones for spiritual purpose, don't work with coyote. So that's where I'm going to leave that, and that's all I'm going to say about that discourse.
Yeah, and I think, like for me, I think that there's ways that when you're dealing with animal parts, you need to do so in a way that is ethical, in my opinion. And when we're looking at ethics, like roadkill, I think is kind of a good aspect of this. Don't like go out necessarily and specifically hunt an animal just to take its skull and use it for witchcraft. Like I'm going to stand on that. And also too, kind of like what Nora was talking about cultural sensitivity when it comes to any sort of magic or witchcraft that could be linked to a culture, it's always in your best interest to be sensitive and also to buy it from someone of that culture as well. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
like I try to make sure that if I'm getting something, in my practice to help support my connection to the lands that I'm residing on, well, we're in North America. So looking at Native American businesses that do, in fact, sell white sage, that do, in fact, sell coyote, that do, in fact, sell dream catchers or various other things that can be controversial. I think that you should be purchasing them from ethical sources. And that's what I will say on that.
Yeah, I agree completely on that. But we're not necessarily going to touch on any closed practices, sensitive as that subject is, um, at least as far as I know. But let's really get into this necromancy tea.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think, we were kind of starting with talking about animal parts. Like I had mentioned the roadkill thing, the bone box. You were talking about your carrion kit.
Oh yeah. So for those who want to know what the carrion kit is, basically, if you are a bone collector and you want to do this in a fairly safe, ethical way, if you see a dead animal on the side of the road and you can safely go and collect it, there are some things that you should probably have in order to do so. Rubber gloves or nitrile gloves or anything that will protect your hands. I would recommend keeping things like cheap plastic ponchos, anything to cover your body and cover your face with a face mask, not just because of the pandemic, but because you don't want to be breathing in any necro animal stuff. And, maybe even something to cover your eyes, like a pair of cheap plastic, like work protection eyewear things, like and large plastic bags of various sizes, but large plastic bags depending on the size of the animal that you are looking to collect. But again, as we've already said, make sure everything that you're collecting is ethically done. Know what the laws are in your city, in your state, when it comes to roadkill. But also, like, be smart. Don't touch things with your bare hands. Don't inhale things that you shouldn't inhale. Don't try to cross dangerous traffic just to get to something. Like, stay safe when you're doing stuff like this.
Yeah. And I think that should definitely be something, since Nora, you started your YouTube channel. That should definitely be something that you should consider making a video about, is like what you keep in your bag for that.
Yeah, for sure. I did start a YouTube channel. Right now there's only one 17-second intro video on there, but I'm planning to film some more videos for that. And necromancy and bone collecting are definitely something that I plan to start some videos on. And I may, in the near future, be considering starting a flesh-eating beetle colony. So there's that too.
Please get some dermicid beetles so I can bring some stuff over.
I'll definitely let you know if I'm able to do that. So other aspects of necromancy are, of course, communion with dead folk. And one of the ways that I incorporate that into my practice, and Jasmine, I know you do this too, is by working with our ancestors. How do you work with your ancestors?
Well, for me, like I have an ancestor altar especially dedicated to my mother, because that was an ancestor of mine who, like, I had an extremely close relationship with. So I keep an altar for her up all year long. And there are things that I do at that altar, like, keeping water for the dead sort of thing. Or more frequently, my mom smoked Marlboro Reds. And so occasionally when I am talking with her, and using, a divination modality as a conduit as well, I will smoke like a Marlboro Red, because that was like one of her cigarettes, as a way to kind of create like that sort of link. Because I don't even like cowboy killers. Okay, I've always been more of a menthol smoker, but enjoying the cigarette is not the point. It's kind of more to serve as like a trigger, I guess, to kind of put me into that sort of state. And that's something I always at least do. I mean, at least once a year. I'm a witch that also celebrates Samhain, our witch's New Year, but also our Day of the Dead kind of thing. And so every year at my sabbatical altar, which is separate from my working altar, I will decorate it with photos of my, direct bloodline and people I knew in life who have passed on. Also, like family, friends, sometimes fur babies as well who have passed. I will put them on the altar for the dead, and I will leave food and offerings. And I actually typically do this all month of October. Like, I don't just limit it to just one night. But I also will have things from my like ethno ancestry as well. So like I've got various little kind of like trinkets and doodle bobs that, correlate that I will put on the altar that more so represent my ancestral lineage and ancestral culture. And then also like the mighty dead, like witches of the past. I actually went to a Dane McCoy's funeral when she crossed the veil. Her funeral was here local, which unfortunately I did not realize. I never put two and two together because I've read some of Dane McCoy's books. I actually have her Magic for Covens sitting right here on my bookshelf that I can see, and her Ostara book. And like I enjoyed a lot of the stuff that she was publishing around the time I first kind of started coming into more of an organized craft system. And so I had her little brochure from her funeral on my altar as a representation of mighty dead, and a mighty dead that I kind of have more interaction with than some of our other mighty dead. And when I'm talking about the mighty dead, I'm talking about the witch blood or the witches who have come before us. But that's another way, is like, our Day of the Dead kind of Samhain sort of feel that we do. Also, another way that I work necromancy is by going into cemeteries and graveyards. And that's a whole bit alone of just like rites and rituals that I find to be beneficial, and ways to do things in a way that is respectful of the space and that won't get you into legal trouble, and that will protect you in the legal sense and the spiritual sense. And like I have friends who have passed on, and I've gone to their graves and communed with them and worked with them. And, there's a lot of red tape also around doing things in cemeteries and graveyards. And actually my good Judy Sharon, who is lovely and has a lot of knowledge and experience in this realm, she's helped me so much with me connecting more to Crown Hill. Which, if you don't know Crown Hill, for those listening, it's one of the largest municipal graveyards in the United States. I'm not sure if it's the largest, but it's up there, meaning it's one of the largest cemeteries in a state's capital. And it's a massively huge, beautiful, beautiful cemetery. But like working with that as well for me is a part of my practice. And by that, I mean like going into a cemetery, which, like Sharon says, you don't have to go to seminary school to be in a cemetery. Graveyards are connected to or owned by religious establishments, and cemeteries are secular. I believe I have that right. Maybe I have that backwards, but I think that's right. And, forging spirit allies that way. I know that Crown Hill Cemetery, at least, has a list of notable people buried, like prominent doctors, lawyers, people in Indian history. Of course, we have the notorious Mr. Dillinger himself buried there, allegedly for entertainment purposes only. But yeah, that's kind of how it works for me. What about you?
Well, a lot of my ancestral practices are very similar to yours. I do have an ancestor altar. I actually need to go clean it up. One of the things that I like to put on my ancestor altar is flowers. I try to keep flowers on there. Fresh flowers are always best if you can help it, but artificial flowers can work just as well. I always keep glasses of water or some kind of vessel with water if I can. Unfortunately, I do have animals, and so my animals will get up onto the altar and they'll drink the water, which my ancestors don't care. as for working with graveyards, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I actually have in my little digital booklet of various spiritual things, I have a list of graveyard etiquette. So things that you should do, like when entering a graveyard, be sure to greet and leave something for the guardian of the graveyard. There's a belief that all graveyards, the boundaries are patrolled by some type of guardian. Um, Never walk on the graves of the deceased. Try not to. If you do, apologize. Never take anything out of a graveyard without permission from the guardian or of the specific grave's residents. So I wanted to bring that one up specifically because in witchcraft, graveyard dirt is kind of a thing that is a big deal. You'll hear a lot of witches talk about using graveyard dirt. Do not just go into a random cemetery and take dirt from someone's grave and think that it's okay. One thing that's very true with graveyards is spirits of the land and spirits of place are very much at play in these places. If you go in and take things that don't belong to you, if you go in and stir up a fuss because you go in and just start doing magic, you're going to cause problems for yourself and for the spirits that are there. You need to develop a relationship with this place, bring offerings, sit and chat with the spirits of the dead, be respectful, build up that relationship. And then after you've had time to build that up, then maybe you can consider doing some work there or taking things from there, but never take anything without leaving something in return also. Yeah, only gather graveyard dirt from the perimeter of the graves, never from the graves themselves. That's another thing, is don't take them from the graves. Like, you can take them from the perimeters once you've developed that relationship, or from other places in the graveyard. If you are coming to leave offerings, what I always like to do at the graveyards that I work at regularly is I will find either the oldest grave there, because the oldest grave there is usually going to denote what ghosts are running the show, what spirits, what spirits of the dead are running the show there. Or I try to find the biggest, oldest tree that I can find, and I will leave offerings there. When you leave, make sure you say bye to everybody. Make sure you bid farewell to the guardian as well. Never force the dead to work with you. If the dead don't want to work for you, don't make them work for you, because that's true for any spirit. Like, don't go into any kind of spirit working thinking that you can just strong arm a spirit into working for you. That's very I'm just going to say it, that's very Solomonic of some magicians. I don't agree with that kind of approach. I like to treat spirits with respect. I'm not here to command any spirit. The only time I command a spirit is if the spirit's causing trouble in my space and I want it to go away. It's about the only time I do that. Just be respectful when you enter a graveyard and you're trying to decide, is this the graveyard for me? The spirits will let you know. If every time you enter a graveyard and you feel this sense of, maybe I shouldn't be here, maybe you shouldn't be there. There's a graveyard near my home that I actually like to go to, and it's divided in half. There's half on a hill, and the graves are very old that are on the hill. And then there's half that is on a slightly flatter plane of land. The hill is like old money, rich white folks, and they do not like me. Anytime I'm on that hill, I feel like there's a lot of aggression towards me. Now, when I go down to the flatter area with all of the people who couldn't afford to be on the hill, it's a completely different energy. So it kind of becomes one of those situations of know your audience. Again, the spirits will let you know if they want you there or not, and just be respectful. That's really what it comes down to with working with the dead and any spirits, is being respectful. Also, if anyone out there has a desire to work with their ancestors and wants some good reference guides for that, there are 2 books I would highly recommend. One of those is Honoring Your Ancestors, A Guide to Ancestral Veneration by Mallory Vaudois. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Vaudois? I don't know. But this book has a lot of information about different types of ancestors, how to work with them, little prayers to them, offerings that you can give them. There's a chapter on healing ancestral trauma, which I think a lot of people need to consider working on. Just saying. And then there's stuff about herbs that you can use to work with your ancestors. There's some spells. Another one that I have that I would also recommend is called Badass Ancestors, Finding Your Power with Ancestral Guides by Patty Wigington, maybe. And again, it's just another really good resource that has a lot of information about how to work with your ancestors, if that's something that you choose to do. And both of them have really great information on altar work and things like that, and eating with your ancestors, divination, all kinds of stuff. So if you want some resources, those are some resources for you that you can go and check out and read and stuff like that. Yeah.
I would like to say, in terms of books, this is not one that I've read myself, so I can't necessarily like vouch for it. But one that I recently kind of heard of is Christopher Pinzak's Ancestors of the Craft. I don't know if you've read that one or not, Nora, but that one is supposed to be a good book to utilize as a reference if you're interested in working specifically with the witch blood, the witches of the past, and the mighty dead, influential real life witches who walked the same dirt that you've walked. As well as I think it also does have some folkloric witches too. So whether or not they ever walked the physical realm in the flesh as we did, that's, you know, neither here nor there. But that's another book that you could look into if you're interested in working with the mighty dead. And in terms of the cemetery or graveyard etiquette, I pretty much agree and kind of co-sign off of virtually everything that Nora said. I think one thing that I have to add to that is something that I personally practice is like I make sure that my head is covered, which I cover my hair all the time.
Oh, absolutely. That's actually in my list. This list of stuff that I have for graveyard etiquette is just really long, and I didn't want to read all of it.
Yeah, I mean, I keep like my head covered all the time anyway, whether it be through scarves or wigs or, you know, extensions or hair pieces, or even just by having my hair up, even if I just put it up in like a big bun or a clip or something. So I'm always to some degree veiled, but I try to take an extra step and veil even more out of respect for the dead and also as a form of protection going into these spaces. And, you know, I think that there's a really interesting discussion that can happen when we're looking at the people of these spaces. Because in terms of my cosmology, like I very much connect with and believe in reincarnation as kind of my sort of afterlife cosmology. And I also believe that some people don't go around the cycle again. They stick around for various reasons. And I also believe through my experiences that sometimes these spirits that we are working with are actually more of like residual energy left over from the influence that that spirit when it was around or that person when they were around had in the physical. Like chances are a lot of these older spirits, in my belief, have already crossed over and are already reincarnated again and again and again. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't also still interact with their sort of spiritual footprint. And I see that a lot, especially with haunted houses, or as I like to call them, like occupied houses, if you will, spiritually occupied. And like, that's not to say that you aren't going to encounter spirits in a cemetery or graveyard either. But sometimes you're not necessarily encountering the actual spirit and you're encountering kind of, I don't want to say the blueprint, but like the imprint of the spirit, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, with that, I have a slightly different view because I definitely ascribe to the whole concept of the triple soul, which is another common thing that you'll find in witchcraft. And I could go over the whole philosophy of the triple soul. I'm not going to do that today, but basically what it is that your soul is that your soul is actually comprised of three parts, and one part of your soul does remain here as kind of an emanation of who you were in life. So there's that, but also I think that there, because I have some ATR background, I was raised with I was raised in hoodoo and things like that. Even though I do not necessarily practice those things anymore, I do believe that the ancestral tribe is built up by those emanations. So when you have ancestors that are staying with you, there are aspects of that ancestor soul that has moved on, but the ancestors that, you know, are grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, even people you may not have known, those emanations are things that stick around to guide us through our life because we are connected to them by blood. Their spirit is connected to our spirit, and that's why those emanations are still around.
Yeah, that's virtually what I would call the imprint. Like,
Yeah.
I think we are on the same page here. I think we're just using different vocabulary.
Yeah, that's likely. As for like hauntings and stuff like that, um, the whole concept of hauntings can get a little muddy, in my opinion. Um, if you really wanted to listen to someone who has some really interesting views on hauntings, I would check out Michelle Belanger. Um, she or they, I'm not sure. I should probably check on that. But Michelle Belanger has some very interesting viewpoints on hauntings and things like that. Now, when it comes to hauntings, I do love a good haunting show, even if they're cheesy or fabricated. I don't know
We
about
love
you,
a
Jasmine.
program.
We
We
love a
love a
program.
program.
I do love a ghost hunter show. Some of them are really over the top and just entertaining, and some of them can be really, you know, thought provoking about what happens after we die and how hauntings work. But moving on to a slightly different subject of necromancy, I also like to think that with necromancy comes the use of channeling the thenotic energies of death itself to perform different types of sorcery. Have you experienced working with the current of death in that way, Jasmine?
Oh yeah, like working with just it's even sometimes referred to as like death magic.
Oh, death magic.
Death
Yes.
magic. Yes. For the theatrics of it all.
And we love a good theatric because, in my opinion, if you're not being a little theatrical with the occult, what are you doing? Like, get into it.
And I love a theatrical moment. And I also too like, you know, we've talked about currents on the podcast before. Like, to me, the current of death is it's an arcane current that can be wielded and tapped into to, you know, bring ends to cycles, to reap things. I think that death can also be used in manifestation as well, kind of like the cycles of life, death, and rebirth, like bringing things into fruition, you know, using death magic in a malefic way, of course. I mean, there's that too.
Oh, for sure. You know, a lot of the death energies that I use, I like to use the word entropic or entropy. For those who would like to have a better understanding what entropy is, basically, entropy is the breaking down of things. Everything is subject to entropy, everything breaks down over time. And so, one of the things that I really like to utilize the current of death energy or entropy is is really for transformative stuff. Sometimes you got to break shit down and let it, you know, decay and rot away. And then
She said, I'm a rock chick. I like to throw stuff around.
just throw stuff around and break it down a little bit. You know what I
Come on,
mean?
Avril Lavigne. I'm a rock chick. I like to throw stuff around. If you guys haven't seen that interview, please go watch it
It's really great.
after this episode. And thank you kindly.
Yeah, it's really great. We love Avril Lavigne. Um, but you know, using death, like Jasmine said, using death energies to break things down, to bring death to maybe a thing in your life that is no longer useful. And also, allegedly, you know, sometimes you have instances in your life where there are beings or people in your life that need help passing on. This is getting sensitive. You know, I have had people come to me and be like, hey, I have this family member. They're really sick. They are no longer here, but they're alive. And I don't know what to do about it. What can I do? You can do sensitive death work to help someone pass on. And here's the thing about that. If it's not their time, if they can come back from that and heal, they will. But sometimes people get stuck. It just is what it is. It's really terrible. Sometimes people get stuck though, and you got to give them a little bit of a hand sometimes. I refer to that as opening the Western Gate and allowing them a clear path of least resistance to move on if it is their time.
And speaking of Western, why do you think it is that water is so much associated with the dead?
So while I am not an Egyptologist, and I know it's not my area of expertise, I have a good friend who is very much a scholar and a historian when it comes to Egypt. What I do know is that a lot of our philosophies about the West and it being the land of like the dead comes from Egypt because of the Western Gate. The Western Gate is the gate through which the spirits of the dead pass to enter into Duat, I believe. I may be wrong about that. If I am, please feel free to post about that in the comments section and let me know. But I do believe that's what it is. But also, aside from that, water, the abyss, is the portal to the underworld. And that's just true in a lot of different mythologies and cultures across the globe. Water is the portal and the mirror through which spirits can communicate with us. It's why we keep water on the altar. It's not just to be libation for our ancestors. It's also meant to be a portal for them to come through. A little aspect of divination that you can do is the water that you leave on your ancestor altar. Look at the bubbles that form in it. Sometimes those bubbles can be messages.
Oh, a little bubbly water.
A little bubbly water. Something I actually like to do with my with the water on my ancestor altar is you know, we'll put it in some like stemware or something like that. Just a couple like wine glasses or something. And then I'll take like a little mirror that you can get like at the craft store, but a little mirror, and I'll put it in the bottom of each one because mirrors are also portals to the lands of the dead. It's why in a lot of historical stuff, they'll talk about how if someone dies in the house, you cover the mirrors, stuff like that.
Oh, speaking of covering mirrors, honey, anytime I go to a hotel, motel, Holiday Inn, dare I say an Airbnb, and the girls who get it, and the girls who don't. But like some people make fun of me because I pack extra pashminas for this reason. And if we stay at Airbnb, you better believe I'm covering up the mirror in the bedroom.
Oh, absolutely. I cover up the mirrors if I'm able to. And, you know, some hotels, they'll have those like the closet doors that are the sliding mirrors, you know. I always bring some kind of mixture, some kind of something. I mean, I always have a little doctor kit with me that has a whole bunch of like little herbs and oils and stuff. You know what I mean? But like, if I'm going to a place where I can't cover the mirror, you best believe that I'm warding that mirror, because if I'm in a place where that mirror is not mine, that thing's getting warded, because I don't need nobody's spooky spirits coming through on me while I'm sleeping. You know what I mean?
Well, and I have like a rather large antique mirror that I know that it's at least probably about the age of my grandmother, if not older, because it was in my mother's childhood bedroom. And then my mother had it in our house, and she had it in her walk-in closet. And I now have it in my bedroom. And so it's kind of a family heirloom. And that's something that I also use a lot in visualization techniques for like astral work. So I don't necessarily cover that mirror in particular, and I don't cover other mirrors in my home.
Right. But like if you're in someone else's space, or if you're in a space that you are not normally in control of, I'm definitely doing a little bit of work on those mirrors, or at least, if nothing else, at least covering them.
Well, and I do keep like my black mirrors covered.
Yeah, I do too.
I do keep those kind of put up, and like I don't just have my black mirrors hung up on the wall as wall art.
Although they do make very nice wall art. And what I will say is this: there have been I have hung up black mirrors before. Now, mind you, I've hung them up and had them covered and everything like that. But there's been many a time, many a night when I've been asleep when that covering has fallen off and I've woken up and some kind of spirit experience has happened that, you know, I needed to have, like spirit communication with, not always with the dead either, sometimes with other things, because, you know, we do be working with other spirits out here.
We do be doing the work. We do
indeed. I lost my train of thought. So what other forms of necromancy do you work with?
I mean, mine mostly boil down to ancestor veneration, working with the mighty dead, and working with animal spirits of the land that I reside on.
Yeah, and you know, that's something that we should touch on too when it comes to ancestor work. Ancestors do not always have to be related to you. They can be friends of the family. They can be people that you had a lot of respect for. Like, there are people in New Orleans who claim Marie Laveau as part of their ancestral tribe because they work within the realm of voodoo. If there are people that you have had deep respect for that you feel could be part of your ancestral tribe, it's possible that they could be, but you have to do the work to find that out. Animals can be part of your ancestral tribe. There can even be non-human spirits that can be part of your ancestral tribe based on their work with your family. I know I have some experience with that. I'm not going to touch on that because that's, you know, personal family tea, but I do have spirits in my family that are part of my ancestral tribe, as well as animal spirits that resonate with my family and things like that. What do you think about that, Jazz?
Yeah, I co-sign off of all of that. Absolutely. I think that, like, you know, I really enjoyed kind of how Keldon broke down talking about spirits in his book, Traditional Witchcraft, where, you know, he talks about these three different aspects of spirits. He talks about ancestors, which is kind of like what Nora just mentioned, like talking about your bloodline ancestors, but also talking about just spirits of the dead that were human at one point, them as well. And then he talks about like the mighty dead. And then he talks about like fetch spirits, which fetch is not necessarily related per se to this topic. But I absolutely agree that you don't have to work with ancestors of your blood. I know people too who also, like, on their Samhain altars or on their Day of the Dead altars, like maybe they haven't joined the grief club yet. Maybe they haven't lost anyone yet. And for some people like that, especially younger people, it can be really difficult to connect to this idea of ancestor veneration. And that's why I think looking into your ancestral culture can be really beneficial for you to find a way to connect with the spirits of your culture as well, your ancestral culture, regardless of where you live. Obviously in a respectful manner, right? But there are ways to do that and to venerate ancestors that you don't even know as well. That can be a part of your bloodline, and it's because of them that you're even here.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's why in some of these podcasts, I've mentioned my whole ATR background, is because, you know, I am biologically a certain percentage African. And so I try to venerate my ancestors from all parts of my ethnicity, from Africa, from Scotland and Ireland and Wales, because that's the primary makeup of my biology. Also, I had a Persian great-great-grandmother, so I've got a little Persian in there. And I try to venerate all of those aspects of myself. This is also where healing certain aspects of generational trauma come in. So I definitely think that when it comes to ancestor work, that's definitely something that everybody should look into, is healing generational trauma, healing generational curses and things like that, because a lot of us out there got it. and it can cause some problems. And so that is an aspect of necromancy that I think a lot of people don't take into account, is the healing aspect and healing that ancestral trauma that a lot of us have.
And generational curses.
Generational curses and things like that. Yep.
And things like that.
And things like that.
Well, and there's also, I mean, that you'll find in a lot of folklore, this whole topic of like necromancers raising the dead, right? Like literal resurrection essentially being mentioned. And like, I know that for me in my ministry, if you will, I look at, you know, raising the dead as more of like a metaphor, as a sense of like conjuring them. I don't necessarily think that it's literal. I think that it's more metaphorical in the sense that you're raising the dead, in the sense that you're bringing the attention of the dead to you and you're invoking them. That's kind of how I look at raising the dead. I don't look at it as like bringing something that's been dead for the past 400 years back to life. Like, I don't see it that way.
I mean, if there is a sorcerer out there doing that, they're real covert, because I feel like people would notice that. And, you know, let's be real, aspects of fantasy are super fun. And as I've stated on like my personal Facebook account and things like that, and this is a video I'm going to be making in the future for my channel, I do believe that we can utilize fantasy to enact certain aspects of magic. I have actually done rituals based on things that I've seen on TV shows that I've of course tweaked a little bit, but that have worked to great success. But do I think that anyone's out here raising zombies from cemeteries and stuff like that? I don't think so. The only thing that I've ever heard about, and I don't even know how legit that this is the whole thing about you can mix a powder from certain bits of like puffer fish and stuff like that to create a powder that will cause someone to act in a zombie-like state. But that has nothing to do with the dead. I don't think anyone's out there raising zombies. You know what I mean?
Well, no. And I also think too that like magic in my world and in my eyes very much follows the rules of nature, and life and death are the pillars of nature.
Yeah.
So I
definitely
don't
agree.
think if something is truly dead that you can truly bring it completely back to life. I think something could be very close to death and you could work magic to bring it back into balance between the worlds. But I don't think if it's completely that way that can really be altered. I don't think that that's really in our control. And I think that that kind of ties in for me when people are in these Facebook groups, right? They're asking for light a candle or good vibes or send energy. Like, I don't think that that's worthless. So I don't want to say that like there's no point in doing that, because I do think that that's good to do. But ultimately, like if someone is on their deathbed, like they're on their deathbed, and you can work magic to try to help support this person, but also sometimes it's your energy is better spent supporting the family around them and the living that are mourning. Sometimes that's a better way to push your magic than to try to cheat the reaper, if you will.
Yeah, usually when it comes to like stuff like that, where it's like, hey, send prayers and love and light and stuff like that, when it comes to someone who's dying, like if their death is certain, that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where like what I'll do is I'll do some work to ease their suffering, if there is any, or to make their transition into death smoother or easier, and to, you know, help the family heal. But I'm also one of those people who's a big proponent of grief is a necessary part of the healing process. A lot of people unfortunately don't know how to let go of grief. And for those wondering, I do have aspirations of being a death doula and a death counselor. So this is something that I go over with people a lot, is that it is important to take time to grieve people that have passed on to the next step in their journey, whatever that looks like for them on the other side. But, you know, do you really think that these people want us to sit around and be sad all the time? No, that's not honoring their spirits. But like, yeah, when people are like, oh, send prayers and healing and stuff like that, I'm like, the best healing that we can do for this person, if they're already in the process of dying, is to make it smoother and more comfortable for them. Now, from a very unethical, alleged scientific standpoint, could you do something to possibly cause a corpse to seem like it's alive? Sure. I'm sure there are things that science could do that could be really strange and unethical with a body to make it move, electric impulses and things like that, but that's not the same thing. Basically what we're getting at here is you're not going to be raising any zombies. And really, when it comes to things like life and death, it's regardless of what you do, it's going to follow the laws of nature.
And I think the last thing I want to touch on really quickly in this last 10 minutes, as I just kind of thought of it, as someone who is a reader and works with the community, and, mediumship is a big T. And like, there are a lot of times where people will have loved ones pass on, and they're looking to have some sort of experience. And a lot of times what they really need is healing support. And what they really need is comfort, whether that be, bringing food to the family. Like, I know that's a big thing for us. Like, if someone is grieving, like, everyone around them kind of like pitches in and will bring food over, because when you're grieving, it can be hard sometimes to eat, or bringing warm, soft, fuzzy blankets, or bringing, nice bath bombs for them to soak in the tub with. And I know that for me, I really try to honor that grief. And so it always makes me a little hesitant to attempt to do any sort of reading on someone who has recently passed, because I feel like you need to give their spirit time for this transition, and you need to honor this for what it is. Because going back to like the whole laws of nature thing, like I think it's best, and I think that the session is typically better received if it's not like, okay, your sister just died 2 days ago and you're coming into the shop looking for a mediumship session. Because what's going to happen 9 times out of 10 with a situation like that is the client is just going to completely shut down and not really going to get anything out of the session, and they're going to turn into a wet puddle of grief.
Right. And I deeply agree with something that you just said. And this is something I've had people come to me as a reader, who have just experienced a loss. And I will never do those readings for them. A good example of this is my roommate recently lost his partner, his boyfriend. And a few days after, he came to me and asked me if I could do a reading about his partner, and I said no. And when he inquired why, I said, you need to give their spirits time to adjust to what has just happened to them. Some spirits acclimate faster than others, and they may come to you and show up in a dream and be like, hey, I'm okay. And others, it may take years and years and years for them to come to a place where they are able to come to you and give you this message, or come to a reader who calls on their spirit and give them information to let a loved one know that they're okay. Again, this kind of goes back to the whole thing about respect in the graveyard, is you cannot force a spirit to do what it doesn't want to do. So, if you've just lost somebody, give it some time. You need to heal. Their spirit needs to acclimate to wherever it is they've ended up in the afterlife. And after a little bit of time has passed, then you can seek a reading. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we as readers will be able to give you any information, because their spirit may not want to talk to us. Stuff like that.
Oh yeah, the dead are just like the living, in the sense that you can call somebody up, doesn't mean they're going to answer. And anyone who is offering you any sort of legitimate services in that regard, will understand that. Like, just because we are sensitive to spirits or mediums or readers or whatever word we choose to use doesn't mean that we can or should command spirits to beckon to our call. But, I think this has been an amazing episode. I was excited to talk about necromancy because I feel like there's so many directions we can take this in. And kind of a fun idea. We didn't really talk much about funerary rites or funerary cultural traditions or customs.
Oh, let me tell you, that's a favorite subject of mine.
Yeah,
And that
and I
could be a
think,
really fun video.
well, I think it would be kind of fun, and maybe we'll do this, maybe we won't. I'm not going to sit here and say we are, because I'm a woman of my word. So if I say I'm going to do something, then I will do it. And I don't know, but it would be kind of a cute kiki if we had a live stream, or if we just had a premiere stream of us talking about funerary rites and customs, and we could get funeral hats. I love a theatrical moment. Like, we could get like some church hats or some funeral hats or something, like a little funerary veil, if you will.
So let me tell you, while I am very much a witch and very much on the left-hand path side of things, I was raised in a spiritual Baptist church. For those who know what I'm talking about, and the ladies at my church knew a thing or two about a hat. So,
well, and I love the idea anyway. Like, I fully plan to, for like my birthday, have like a funeral party, like a funeral themed party, where I will be expecting everyone to like come in black and veiled and all those things. But I think the funerary traditions and like our personal relationship with death and our mourning and things of that nature, that could be a whole other topic. I think this has opened up another avenue for us to talk about, but we do need to bring the stream to an end, because I'm looking at the clock here, and if we're over 60 minutes, StreamYard doesn't like that. So let's kind of bring this to a close. Do you have any closing thoughts, Nora?
Be respectful of the dead. Mostly that.
And mostly that, yeah. I'm a co-sign on that, and yeah, that's it. So until next time, be well, raise hell, and blessed be.
Blessed be.